Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Behind the Tripod cast. This is something I've wanted to do for ages and I'm really excited to be here bringing this to you. My name's Steve. I run the Behind the Tripod YouTube channel and our website, and this is a new offshoot from that. And what I want to get from this podcast is an opportunity to have a more informal conversation about photography with you all, I suppose, rather than the more formal tutorials that we do on the YouTube channel. So the YouTube channel will still be available as usual, giving you tips and tricks and helping you new photographers to learn photography. This one, if you're watching it on YouTube, they're not normally going to be on this channel. This is just to introduce the podcast. I'm going to be popping these in a new YouTube channel just called the Behind the Tripod cast YouTube channel. Easy to remember. And I'll be making these podcasts available on all the places that you normally get podcasts from. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, anywhere like that. I'll be making these podcasts available. And why am I starting a podcast? Well, it's just something I've wanted to do for a long time. And as I said, I just want to have that opportunity to have a more informal discussion with you all about photography without the constraints of always teaching something. Sometimes it's just nice to talk photography. So with that in mind, in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at mindfulness in photography, because I think mindfulness is something that's very, very linked to photography. And I'll talk about my own story in just a moment, but I think that mindfulness and photography go very, very well together. They're natural bedfellows. So I want to talk about that a little bit and how I've brought mindfulness into my own photography and how I think you can bring mindfulness into your photography to both improve your photography, but also just your general mental health, your general well-being, and some of the other benefits. So as I said before, my name's Steve. This is the Behind the Tripod cast. Welcome to the first episode, and let's get into this episode on mindfulness in photography. So mindfulness, what exactly is it? Well, mindfulness is something that I came across first back in the 1990s from a book called The Miracle of Mindfulness, which is by a Vietnamese monk who came over to, I think it was France during the Vietnam War, and then went back, and he wrote this wonderful book about mindfulness. It was quite confusing. I've read it a few times and it's very in-depth, but it does give some basic principles of mindfulness, and that kind of sparked my interest. Now, I love to read, I love to listen to audiobooks, I like to broaden my mind as much as possible, not just photography things and business things, but sort of anything really that I think that's interesting. And mindfulness is something that I am interested in, and I have read several books on, and I do try and incorporate some of the principles into my daily life. And I think that mindfulness and photography work extremely well together, because photography is about being present in the moment and trying to capture a moment on film or on your sensor and trying to make an image that captures a mood or a feeling or a subject in a certain way and putting your own spin on it. Well, mindfulness is very similar. It's about being present in the moment. It's about being aware of what's happening, trying to think about the past or the future, and trying to just focus on the here and now, which I think goes with photography very, very well. Mindfulness has also been very, very highly researched in recent years. So clinically, mindfulness has been shown to have many benefits for a whole host of mental health conditions, addictions, all sorts of things. Mindfulness is now used and prescribed by some GPs for some medical conditions. So it's becoming very mainstream. You may have heard of it before. And the main principles of mindfulness are your breath, your senses, the body, and your thoughts and emotions. So it's trying to think about those 4 different points as you're doing your mindfulness practice. And we're going to talk in a moment about how you can bring those into your photography to enhance your photography and to enhance your mental health as well. And there are many, many benefits to mindfulness, which I also think are some of the benefits of photography as well. And they can certainly include improving depression and anxiety. And how I got into mindfulness and with photography was through my own story of anxiety a few years ago. This is pre-pandemic. This is probably about 2018, 2019. I began to suffer from a form of anxiety. It was caused by stress and overwork. I was running my own business. I was working 60, 70-hour weeks, and I was exhausted. And that came across to me in anxiety. And it wasn't until I started really making the time to go out and do photography for photography's sake, for just the pure enjoyment, and to take a more mindful approach in my photography, that I really managed to get on top of my anxiety. And it's something now that really has settled. And if I ever feel that kind of bubbling up again, then I find photography is there for me, photography and mindfulness together. So it can be a really powerful combo. And I speak from my own experience that I've found photography has really helped to settle anxiety, to improve my mental health. And to be honest, if I don't do photography and link it with mindfulness fairly regularly, I start to notice a difference, and so do my family. That feeling of anxiety can start to build up again. So it's really, for me, really important that that photography and mindfulness are put together for my own practice of photography. But it can also help with stress management. It can help with emotional resilience. As I said, there's evidence about mindfulness in terms of addictions and overcoming addictions. So there's all sorts of things that mindfulness can help with. And photography can do the same thing. So put them two together and they can be quite powerful. So with that being said, thinking about mindfulness, how can we bring a mindfulness practice to our own photography? It's actually a lot easier than you might think, because photography, if you think about, say, landscape photography, for instance, if you're out in nature and you're out in the environment, one of the things that you'll be doing is immersing yourself in nature, trying to be really present in that moment and in that time. And that's essentially what you're doing in mindfulness. Now, there's a few techniques that we can talk about in a moment that you can try next time you're doing a photo shoot. It's not just landscape photography. This will work for any area of photography. But there's certainly a few techniques you can try that will help to enhance your mindfulness, and it will help to improve your photography as well, because you start to see things and be aware of things that maybe you would miss if you're working in a little bit more of a hurry, which certainly, used to be my workflow, was very quick, very hurried, cracking on, getting to the next location. And when I slowed down and started to use mindfulness, my pictures improved hugely. And you don't have to be a professional photographer. You don't have to really understand the cameras to any degree. You can do mindfulness with photography with just your smartphone. It's just about slowing down. So let's think about some techniques that you can do next time you're doing a photo shoot, even if you're photographing on your phone, some things that can help you to slow down and bring more mindful approach into your photography. And the first thing I would suggest is that when you arrive on location, instead of rushing around looking for the composition, unpacking, getting the tripod out, getting the camera on, or getting your smartphone out and clicking away, just stop for a few moments, take a deep breath, maybe sit down if you can, and just start to be aware of your surroundings. So use your eyes to start with, being aware of the light and how the light's falling on the land, how the light's changing. So if it's a landscape photo shoot, how the clouds and the lights sort of changing. Is there dappled light moving across the landscape? If you're doing a street photography session, for instance, what's the ebb and flow of the people walking in and out of the area that you're at? Really become aware of visually what's happening in the area. And that alone will really help with your compositions. So slowing down and just thinking about what's going on and really sort of trying to feel what you think might be happening in that area. The second thing to think about is, what do you hear? So what's going on? What's going on around you? Is there bird song? Is there a busy street? Is there traffic? Is it quiet? Is there water? Because these are all things that can add to the emotion of the area that you're trying to photograph. They're also ways of sort of, resting ourselves or balancing ourselves in the environment that we find ourselves in. So be aware of the sounds around you. And when we come to take the photograph, if you've got that awareness, they will come into the picture, that sense of calm or that sense of busyness or that sense of energy or peace and quiet. It will all come into the image. So part of that is, how does it sound? Next thing really is be aware of smells. Use your nose. We don't photograph with our noses, but use your nose. It's all part of being aware of the environment and being where we are. So what does it smell like? Is it sort of like wet grass? Can you smell? One of my favourite smells is in the hot summer when you've got tarmac. It rains on the tarmac and you get that kind of tarmac smell. I don't know why, but I love that smell. But that's a real kind of reminds me of childhood. Again, cut grass is another one. Mud. Unpleasant smells. Can you smell like smog or city smoke? All these sort of things can add to the feel and the mood of an area that you're in and helps to bring you into that area. And as well, think of the environment on you. So are you cold? Are you hot? Can you feel wind on your skin? Does it feel cold on your skin? What's the air feeling like as you're breathing? Can you sort of feel the air going into your lungs? Does it feel cold? Is it warm? Is it, as I said, is it smelly? Is it, really be aware of the sensations around you. And if you're sitting down or standing up, being aware of the ground under you and around you and the sort of the environment around you. So you're really trying to I would say almost immerse yourself into the surroundings that are around you. The next thing to think about if you're looking at mindfulness is your breath. And it's something that I find the breath fascinating. Before I do photography, I trained initially as a physiotherapist. And one of the areas of physiotherapy that's not often talked about was respiratory physiotherapy. And respiratory physiotherapy, we talk about the lungs and this sort of area, the respiratory system. And one of the things that stands out to me that I always think about with the respiratory system is it is really unique because it's automatic. So we breathe all the time without thinking about it, but we can also control it. We can hold our breath, we can slow our breath, we can speed our breath up by choice. So, it's good to use that control. We have that control over our breath. So let's bring our awareness to the breath and keep the awareness on the breath. I'll say with mindfulness, you're not trying to change how you're breathing. So you're not trying to slow it down. You're not trying to speed it up. You're just being aware of the breath. So how many times can you count in as you breathe in? How many times can you count as you breathe out? And that's a nice way of just being aware of how we're breathing. Normally, you'll find that as you're aware of the breath, it'll actually naturally start to slow down. And as I've said to you before, if you start feeling anxious, for myself, if I start getting any form of anxiety, and anxiety is normal, by the way, in a lot of senses. If you're going to a new job or a busy place, it's quite normal to feel a sense of anxiety. That's not abnormal anxiety. So if I'm ever feeling that, just concentrate on my breaths. Brings the awareness to the breath. It calms things down. The tendency of anxiety is to breathe faster. So by being aware of the breaths, it kind of slows things down and calms it down. And with mindfulness, we're trying to be aware of the present moment. So if you've got your camera out and you're doing photography, trying to be aware again of all those things we talked about, but in the present, and trying not to think too much or dwell too much on the past and future. So don't try and think, is this picture going to be amazing? Or, my last picture was rubbish, this will be rubbish too. Any of those things. It's trying to just be aware of where we are at that time. Now, that's easier said than done. They talk in mindfulness, and certainly what I found helpful is to not try and force your thoughts back to the here and now and get annoyed with yourself, because it will happen. You'll go to the future and think, I'm doing it again, come back. Go into the future, come back, keep bringing it back. I kind of think of it a bit like a toddler who's going off for a walk and they're always interested in everything that's around you. And you just keep gently bringing them back to the path, bringing them back to the here and now. And it's a bit like that with your thoughts. Just try and keep them here, try and keep them now, try not to let them wander off into the future or the past. Just bring it back to the breath, bring it back to those surroundings, to the smells, to the sights, to the sounds, the environment that you're in, and just keep bringing those feelings back and those thoughts back to where you are now. And the wonderful thing about mindfulness in photography is it not only helps to settle our minds, but it helps us take better photos, because yes, there's a technical side to photography, and there's a technical side to composition, and you've got all the camera settings, but take all that aside. Once you've got the hang of those, actually bringing a mindfulness approach to your photography can really help to slow you down and can help you to see things and to experience things that you wouldn't normally experience. So you might think an area feels really calm when you really touch into that place. So you'll be looking for compositions that bring a calmness and maybe sort of bring a nice sort of a calm feeling to the images. I'm not explaining that very well, am I? But you know what I mean. Again, you might be somewhere that's really lively and you might feel a real energy and a pulsing energy in the place. So you might find compositions that really, really drive that energy. So use that in your compositions. Have a go at mindfulness. Next time you're out doing some photography, think about those steps, immerse yourself in the environment, concentrate on your breaths, concentrate on your sitting or your standing, think about your breaths and try and keep the awareness on those things before you even get the camera out, I'd say, even before you start. But even when you've got the camera out, keep that awareness on your surroundings and then try and include how you're feeling. Try and just own it. How do I feel at the moment? Own that feeling and try and bring that into your images in some way. And you'll come up with more unique images and more special images, images that will be yours then, rather than just your generic rule of thirds images. Okay, so that's it for our first episode of this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, if you're on YouTube, please like it, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've enjoyed it. And if you listen to this on Spotify or iTunes, somewhere like that, please leave a comment, and please rate this podcast, because it will really help me moving forward as I try and develop this podcast. That's it for me. I'll see you in a month's time. Take care now. Bye bye.